Hello, everyone. Welcome to Being Bolder, and I'm Rustin Hamilton with Bronwyn Weaver. We are on episode number 4 of our podcast. We thank you if you're tuning in with us today. And by the way, if I use words like radio terms, like tuning in and stuff, I do have a bit of a radio background, so it does come honestly anyway. So I don't know if I'll ever totally get away from that, Bronwyn.
Yeah, I know. It's a whole new world, but we end up dragging some of our old world along with us, right?
Absolutely. So, if this is your first time catching us, we would encourage you to actually go back to episode 1 and 2 and listen to, or and 3, but especially 1 and 2. That gives a really good description of why we're here in general. And we have put together a new publication called Boulder Magazine that we are very excited about. And the purpose of this podcast is really just to talk about the publication, what goes on behind the scenes, some things that we've learned along the way, some things that we believe you can learn along the way that I think would be interesting. And our magazine is for people from 8 to 80, and I would say our podcast leans a little higher than 8 probably, but we'll keep it safe. This is a family friendly podcast. So Bronwyn, what's new? What's going on?
Well, I hope I'm so glad that you are joining us in this podcast. And I want to assure you that our podcast will evolve. We've got a lot to tell you right now about who we are, where we're coming from in terms of, um, what is driving us to be involved in this magazine. So we've got kind of a backlog of things. And one of the things that in our magazine, which is all about where things come from and why we care so much, we want to make this magazine, whether you're 8, whether you're 14, whether you're 34, a parent looking over your child's shoulder at our magazine, we want there to be something for everybody. And when Rustin and I were talking about our own experiences of learning, we had a shared experience that was really pretty telling. And we found out how we could take that experience, bring it up to 2024, and incorporate it into what we were doing at the magazine. So, Rustin, do you want to let the cat out of the bag that Peter and the Wolf
Yeah.
influenced us?
So one of the things that we've had determined from the beginning is that we would have a story in the publication. Um, we've done 2 of them so far because we've already written the one for the second publication. And they are basically more or less fictional stories, but so far they've been based on true stories. Okay. But in the future, it could be anything. And it's really designed to entertain as much as anything, and just for something to enjoy. Probably leans a little bit more for kids, but it's parents I think would enjoy it as well. But when we started throwing, batting this back and forth, it reminded me of when I was a little kid and would listen to stories. And I know they still do this in public schools today, where you can order books through the school library, right? And we could do that way back then when I was growing up as well. And
Yeah, way back
way
then.
back
Yeah,
then.
3 or
Fortune,
400 years ago. Yeah,
Fortunately,
go
you and
ahead.
I are around the same age, so we
Yeah.
can't give each other too much trouble about age. Anyway, but you could order books that would have a 45 record with them, and they would read the
That
book.
really does
It does.
make us sound old.
Embrace it.
Cassette, even that makes you sound old. But yeah, a 45,
It's what
that's
it
what I
was.
had. Yeah. Yep.
Hug the cactus, as they say, Bronwyn. Hug the cactus.
Yeah.
So, so you would get it home, and you would have the book that you could read yourself. It had all the illustrations and the artwork and so forth. But you had the 45, and you could put it on, and there's great
Wait a minute, wait
voice.
a minute.
Yeah,
Okay, so what did you play it on?
I
Did you
played.
have
I
like
played it on
your
a
parents?
record player.
Yeah, I know. Was it like
Yeah,
your parents' stereo? 'Cause I had a little, um, record player,
Yeah.
and it was red with a checkerboard red top, and it was like a little suitcase.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my experience, and
Yeah.
it was so exciting. You'd have the book in front of you in your lap,
Yeah.
and then you'd get out the record player, you'd plug it in, and you'd put the 45 on it, carefully put the needle down on the
Right.
record. I mean, that
Yeah.
the whole experience, and then you'd have somebody read it to you with all the music and
Yeah.
sound effect. It was
Right.
like a magical experience that I'm
Well, it
remembering
was.
right now.
And my favorite was Peter and the Wolf. And so if you're, again, if you're probably older than 40 or something like that, you may remember, maybe it's 50, Peter and the Wolf, but it has a very distinct sound. It has dun, 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 dun,
Yeah,
dun, dun, dun,
yeah.
dun. So that would come on at the beginning, when you would put the record on, and then Peter and the Wolf by whatever, the author, and then they would go into the story. So how does that apply today? So we thought it would be kind of fun to basically do the same thing. Now people don't have record players, and by the way, I think we did have one of those little ones,
Did you?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had one in the console, so something that was easy for us to use. So had to answer that question. So today, what would be today's version of that? Do people still want to hear someone read a story to them? Well, we know they do, even adults, because books on tape is what they used to call it, but audio books, and you can do all of that stuff today. But for kids to be able to do both at the same time, read it and have somebody read it to them, was an awesome thing. And so for our version, they basically will have in the magazine the story, and it will have some illustrations that go along with it, provided by your daughter Maggie Archibald, who does a great job, and it's a perfect style for what we're doing. And then this is where, even though we are only a magazine, again, if you are new to us, this magazine is not online. It is just a physical publication that is very much on purpose. But we do have a website, of course. That's how you subscribe and get extra content, learn more about us. So back to the story. So in the story, if you want to open it up, Bronwyn, you basically have a QR code there. So you could use your phone. There you go. Our first story was the three-legged dog and his pet duck. And you can bring up the audio portion of the story by clicking on the QR code, and it will take you to the audio. So it basically accomplishes what the old 45 did, in a obviously more
In a
current.
2024 kind of way.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, we're excited about that. It's not a huge deal necessarily, but it is fun, and it is a way to, for kids to be able to use a little bit of technology
Yeah.
while they're in the book. And the whole purpose of the magazine really is that we're pulling people away from their computers and from their laptops and
From all the screens.
for the
I
screens,
think
that's what I meant. Yeah,
yeah, because I think that one these kinds of stories that you are going to be exposed to in Boulder Magazine, we want kids to be able to close their eyes and imagine a scene.
yeah,
That something's going to spark their imagination and they can see themselves sort of transported somewhere else in time and in space. In our first issue, this story, it's amazing. This is really a based on a true story of this team of folks that they were tasked with identifying abandoned oil wells that may have been drilled anywhere from, I don't know, I think one of the oldest wells that these guys had found was drilled in about 1880, up through modern day. And let me give you a little bit of background on that because I think the whole thing is kind of interesting. Abandoned wells it sounds kind of horrible, but actually it's maybe there could be a better phrase for it, but these are oil wells that were dug a long time ago based on the science and technology that was available then. And when the well had been um, spent, when it had done its job, before there were regulations and oversight, and before people really appreciated all the implications of doing that, they would just leave them. And sometimes in some counties, they would not even have a record in the courthouse or be on the property maps. They would just be a place in the corner of a field where there was obviously an old foundation, and some of them not big, like maybe 6 feet by 6 feet, or
Mhm.
an old oil well. And it's not oozing oil or anything like that. It's just maybe a piece of concrete and some metal that represent kind of where an old well went. Well, anyway, these two guys were tasked with finding where the old well had been, and then they were commissioned to go in and properly seal it, properly reclaim it, and make sure that it was never going to cause any problems. It would just be properly taken care of.
Yep.
That journey of them going back, finding that well, and then uh, being alongside of a stream as they were walking back in the country and finding it. That sets the stage for our story that we put in Boulder Magazine. One of the fellows, who happens to be my brother-in-law, is one of the experts in this part of Ohio and West Virginia and Pennsylvania in doing this sort of abandoned well or orphan well recovery. A truck pulled up beside him with a little girl and a father looking desperately for their pet dog, who only had 3 legs and in turn had his very own pet duck. So, anyway, Rustin, you wanna elaborate further?
Well, so it was actually the duck that was lost. So
Yeah.
they did have the dog, but it was a three-legged dog. And what would happen is every day, these people lived out in the country, and every day the dog would pick up the duck, like holding the duck in its mouth, and run off with the duck. And they would go have their own little adventures, whatever. And so, but like clockwork, every day the dog would bring the three-legged dog would bring the duck back. And so a little girl, they both were her pets, and one day the dog came back without the duck. All right, so distraught, of course, the little girl, had her dad go with her so they could go find the duck, and so the girl and the dad ran across your brother-in-law,
Yes.
basically, and a worker out in the country as they were working on an older well. And then when really, we can't tell them too much more because
Except
we
that
don't
it
want.
has a happy ending.
It does have a happy ending, okay? So, but it's so anyway, it's just a neat little story, and in this case, it really happened. I mean, it is pretty much almost exactly the way it's written is exactly pretty much the way it occurred, and so,
And,
but we
that
have we have music with it. We
yeah,
have an amazing voiceover artist that is voicing the story,
the
and
talent.
so
We'll refer to him as the
it's just
talent.
yeah, yeah.
It
It
might sound awfully familiar.
took a
Yeah,
long time to find
yeah.
this person, so
It was Rustin. But, it was our we knew that it was good. So, to sort of summarize, both Rustin and I had an experience where when we were younger, the story being it didn't take away from the experience of having the book in front of you. It just enriched it.
yeah.
And it wasn't like watching something on TV or a movie where you just sort of zone out and everything is brought to you. When you're listening, and I'm sure that most people that are listening, well, obviously, you're listening to this as a podcast. You have that experience of hearing an audiobook, and it almost ignites or augments your imagination in making it easier to imagine the scene being set. So we decided with our very first issue of Boulder Magazine that we would try it. it was a great success. We figured out the technology, we figured out kind of our rhythm. So you'll see that in the second issue, I think the story goes to another level. And I would imagine it's going to evolve. And based on feedback that we get, we may do more and more of these features within the magazine so that people can have that an audio experience to go along with holding the magazine in their hands, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's
Yeah.
just something I think we're gonna do more and more of because
I think so. I
it
think
was so
so.
fun to do,
Yeah.
frankly, and
Yeah.
it's been really well received.
Yeah. And it's a fair amount of work. The
Yeah.
probably the majority of the work in it is really putting the special effects in it and the music and I generally write the stories, or at least definitely the second one all the way through. And the second one, by the way, I think will be fascinating, and it is again based on a true story, but it's called "The Donkey Who Flew Up the Stars," and so but it's about a tornado that hits a family in Oklahoma, and that family in real life had a donkey that disappeared after the storm. And they also had a lot of horses and a lot of other livestock and so forth. But anyway, I won't go into it any more than that because that story is even again is a little flies fairly high, to be honest with you. No pun intended. With kind of um, some a combination of real life and fantasy. So we're really
Mhm.
excited to get that one out. But that's in the second. That is in the second publication. So, but
And
so
that's what we're trying
subscribe.
to do.
Yeah,
You know, we want to make this fun and engaging and interesting, because that's when we found, I know as parents, as professionals, you can do the most wonderful teaching when people are interested. And so we know that that's the goal of a lot of the things that we're putting in the magazine is to make it as interesting as possible. So we would love to hear from you. Um, Again, please check us out at bouldermagazine.com. Write us at info@bouldermagazine.com. Let us know how things are landing, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to hear more of, and know that we want to bring our storytelling skills to talking about our Earth's resources, to talking about being out in nature, and and where things come from
yeah,
above and beyond everything else. So,
yeah.
thank you for letting us tell you a little bit about some specific things within the magazine. We'll probably do a little bit of both, what we're working on, and showing off a little bit about what we've done and why we did things the way we did. So, thank you for being a part of this podcast. Please like it and share it. Those things mean a lot as we're getting going. We appreciate you very much.
We do. Until next time, have a great day.
Okay, take care. Bye bye, everybody.